Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle. Sam and Lisa both on today. We've got the full team, and we're going to talk about something that I think can help your team this year, specifically you being able to help yourself and in return being able to help your team. And it's becoming a better teacher. Now, not everybody loves this topic because the hard X's and O's, I got to do this, the culture, I got to do this. But like, what about you being better at teaching? Specifically, we're going to talk about teaching on the defensive end. And the better you get it, the five things we talk about all the time in PGC coaching, you have your systems and strategies, you have your leadership, you have culture, you have player development, and master teaching is kind of the one that kind of hangs out there a little bit. And, how do I actually become a better teacher of the game? And this is where I think separation happens between good coaches and great coaches. They're really good at teaching. So we could go really broad on this and talk about a whole bunch of different teaching aspects, but we're going to narrow it down to becoming a better teacher on the defensive end. And so I'm going to open it up, just giving a couple of different thoughts. I've seen a lot of teams be successful doing a lot of different things. We all have, like on offense, defense. We've seen it. Now, the best I've ever seen at doing a particular thing, we'll stick to defense. They were really good at teaching the little nuances and the things that actually made a difference. So installing a system is one thing, like pretty much everybody can do that. And you can do it to different levels. Like the more you know the system forward and backwards, the better you are at installation. Over time, you learn to collapse time frames to be able to install it faster. You learn how to break down different things that make the defense better. But really, the ones that are great at it, they're really, really good at teaching the nuances and the things that most people don't pay attention to, in my opinion. Lisa, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would agree. To me, that comes down to part of it is the mindset too, because to be able to focus and play the game, and I've always wanted players who are locked in on what's in front of them, and not worried about I need to be here or what are we doing here, all these things, because I think we can give them too much to think about, and you really want them to play instinctive, but then also within your principles. And so then they can understand those nuances. But I think that mindset is really important, because I find a lot of times on the defensive end that they can just be thinking either too much, which makes them slow to get to their spots or in the right position. Thinking too much, they get distracted, so they forget what defense we're in if we like to switch things up, and not being aggressive when they need to be, and taking those opportunities when they're there because they're trying to play it safe rather than play the game. That they're out there the ones making plays, so we need them to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts on if you want to be a good teacher of defense, I mean, I do actually think we were talking a little before we recorded. I think you got to know your system. I'm not sure that everybody knows how to install a system and go A to Z with it and how to progress through installing a defense. So I think if you're going to be a good teacher, you got to know your system. You got to know what do you want, your identity and mindset. Lisa, you just said the word mindset. I agree, and maybe kind of couple that with identity. I think you got to know, yeah, what are we going to be really good at, and then ultimately, a good like any good teacher, how do you get the people you're leading to believe what you're saying and buying into whatever those other two things are? Because it doesn't matter what the coach wants as much as it matters is the coach able to ultimately sell the vision and do it in a way that everybody buys in and fulfills their role to their maximum ability.
Yeah. So let's break this down a little bit. Like think about the first thing, like just curious, like no long answer here, just a short answer on this one because we're going to build up here, okay? So like what is the number one thing? So as a coach goes in there, build out their defense, like we always talk about extreme clarity, making the main thing the main thing. So if you could only pick one thing to teach on the defensive end, right? Like you're just this is the main thing. And I say this, and I love to put coaches in a box because I'm not a big fan of the answer. Well, this and that. Well, this and you have a whole bunch of things because I think it just allows you to get out of like what is the most important thing. So when you have to put down an answer, like you can only teach one thing on the defensive end. What do you teach, Lisa?
Okay, mine might be a little bit. off from what you're thinking, but I think if we can name the win, what do we want? What are the shots we're trying to get the offense to take? What's a win for us in terms of the shots they're taking or the outcome of the possession? And I think again, I could think about body position or principles or whatever, but I just feel like if we know what the goal is, regardless of whether or not they make the shot, uh, then our players can understand how to fix it themselves.
Okay, so we go in, and Lisa, I'm going to sum up your answer here. That you can only talk about one thing, and you're going to talk every single day in practice about the shots we're trying to make them take. Okay, Sam, what about you?
Effort.
Effort. Okay, and so look, there's no wrong answer, but what happens is you go into practice, and I see this happen all the time, is you get so far removed from what the main thing is that you're going to get. And I think that the really good teachers that I've seen, they almost never leave home base. They always tie it back to whatever it is. So if Sam goes in and he's running a defensive practice, everything is tied to effort. And there's a ton of things that go and unfold from there. Or when Lisa goes into practice, like consistently and constantly mentioning like this. Now, it might be this is why we gave up that shot. This is why we didn't. So you're teaching from that point, but you're going back to just ingraining in them, this is not the shot that we want, or this is the shot we want to force them to take. I think that's a really good starting point for coaches is don't leave home base too often. Like, don't forget what the main thing is, because it can be very easy to go in like Sam and your thing and talk about like effort, effort, effort. And then you go and you start teaching ball screen defense, off ball screens, and there's technique. And then you just forget about effort, right? Like that can be. So the most important thing. Now, let me go to the next part of this here. It's like, I think this is an important one. I think the best defensive coaches I've ever been around have a communication system. Like they're really good at communication. So this is one of those things where teaching in there, and two examples of that. I mean, just like simple examples. I think is early, loud, and often. I think that might have been Rivers, Doc Rivers. I'm not sure. Their communication. We're going to talk early. We're going to be really loud. We're going to do it often. Like that's a way. At PGC, we teach night communication: name, information, tone, and eye contact. So if I want Sam to box out, Sam, box out. I said his name. I gave him the information. I said it with a tone of urgency. And hopefully I made eye contact so that he got the information, right? So building some level of communication. So let's stay there for a second. So one, making the main thing the main thing. All right. Now, two, let's talk about communication. And Sam, what are your thoughts there on like what makes for good communication? How do we actually do that? Like even if you have a system, how do we bring that to life with a team?
I guess I'll answer by saying there's levels to it. So level one would be we just talk. We actually just say words out of our mouth. This is why it's important in practices to get in the habit of talking. That's a pretty low level though, but that's a good starter. Level two is we're given some sort of encouragement. You know, maybe there's a little bit of terminology. I'd say level three, we're talking about the highest levels, what you see at a high level high school, college, pro program, is they're going to have terminology. They're going to say relevant information, not just talking. They're going to actually communicate. So screen left, under, like we know what that means. Top lock, whatever it is, like there's terminology involved, TJ. So I can't remember your first question, but the communication would have to be reminders, terminology, all on one page, and it's all five doing it. We're not just talking; we are a one unit communicating in unison with each other.
Yeah. Lisa?
Yeah, if I add anything, I think it's either important or it's not. And I find a lot of times that in coaching, we talk about communication, we kind of are emphasizing for a time, and then they will literally stop talking. Not your best talkers, but half your team will stop talking once you start playing or competing. And again, I go back, it's either important or it's not. And the best teams that I've ever had communicate are the ones where I don't really love getting on the line and running because you're not communicating, but you're competing and you lose your chance to compete in that rep because you weren't talking, if it's that important to you. And so I think you have to do that every day. Like you're not communicating, you're off. And again, it doesn't have to be emotional or anything, but teaching them those pieces, like we're going to do this all the time, and celebrating it. And then I think the third one that I would add is the names. I think the best communicators use names within there. They're really actually talking to each other. Like, Sam, I got your help. TJ, I'm in your gap. Like, Sarah, screen, whatever that is. That's, I feel like, communication I've seen work the best when we're really talking to each other and using names, whether it's on offense or defense. I've just seen it be way more effective.
Yeah, I've got a couple thoughts for coaches on communication. I think you could actually just apply right now and become a better teacher. So I'm going to share those. And one background piece on this is, we've shared this at PGC, if you ever watch like a mic'd up situation of an NBA game, like the highest level, NBA, WNBA, they are talking, communicating with each other almost like they're having a conversation. Part of that is because I think the game slowed down for them. They've been doing basketball for so long, and they're not overthinking, and so they're really good at giving information on the defensive end. But here's three things that I think you could do to become a better teacher on defense related to communication. Number one is give them like the why, because players don't understand, like, why do I need to communicate? Coach is on me. It's like a coach thing. So I say this to my players all the time. If you care about winning, you care about communicating. And why is that? Because if I tell the player screen right and they get over it and we don't have to help there, we're not going to get into a situation where we have to rotate, give up a good offensive rebound. So your communication saved us from a bad situation. So if you care about winning, you care about communicating, because that communication can save us from bad situations. And so that gives us an advantage over the other team. And if you care about winning, you are always looking for advantages. And if you don't communicate, you don't care about gaining an advantage. And I'll assume that you don't care about winning. And so, like, that is the why. Like, communication leads to winning. I say building that belief in them, like Sam alluded to earlier, like you got to get them to buy in belief. That's number one. Second thing I think you can do that's really practical is pick 3 to 5 words and make sure your team knows all those words. I say 3 to 5 because maybe you're coaching a freshman high school basketball team. Okay. So 3 words. I'll give you 3 words. So, like, and you can use whatever words you want. So we say mud, which is, when you're one pass away, you're in the gap. And we say mud instead of gap because we want them to make it muddy. We want it to be hard to tell whether I can drive or not drive. And so there's one word. Like, I want every player on my team to be able to say, I'm in the mud. So they're going to be able to say mud, mud, mud. So that's just one word. Okay. Everybody needs to get that word. It's just simple syllable. Get that. All right. Second word, goalie. Means I'm 2 passes away. Like, I'm the biggest person to help. I'm the one that has to stop the ball from going in the basket. I'm the help. I'm the goalie. So there's a second word. Everybody. And then, your third word, maybe it's right and left. So like ball screen. So maybe I'm say 4 words here, right or left. So we say, anytime we say right or left, we're talking to the ball. So you don't even have to say the name. Lisa right, Lisa left. Like, there's only one person we're talking to, and that's the person guarding the ball. So right, left. So if your team didn't do anything all season long, but they could always articulate they were in the mud, or they were the goalie, right? Or they can tell the person that's guarding the ball, they're getting screened. Okay. If they did that at 100% level, like every single possession, every single play, loud, whatever, your team would actually be pretty decent at communicating before we go any further. Like, if they just did that all of the time. And so you don't have to think big. Like, communication, sometimes I think there's deeper levels of communication, like we were all just talking about, name, information, tone, like, it'd be great to get to, right? But if you can just get 3 words that everybody in your team knows to say, and they say it every single time, that would be you'd be better than 95% of teams on defense communication if you just had those 3 words they said every time. And then the third point that I will give to helping apply communication to your team is, first of all, slow equals smooth, smooth equals fast. And so let's just take your shell drill, for example. Instead of going shell drill full speed, go 25% speed. The offense can only walk. And that'll allow the defense to have time to think and talk. and then they jog through it. And now you have to communicate through that and then go full speed. There's going to be drop off at every level. But if you can slow things down for players and then eventually they get the words and the timing, whatever, then you can speed it up. So those are three things that I think would help your team communicate better. Guys, anything you want to add to that?
That was pretty good, TJ.
Thank you, Lisa. That's what I was looking for, is some affirmation. I appreciate that. Um, uh, yeah, Sam, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think as far as communication goes, that's well said. I think we all kind of offer different things that I think coaches could take away and be good. Okay, I do have one thing now that I think about it. You were mentioning mud. So I think any terminology that you can use that your team knows and the other team doesn't is an advantage. So instead of saying switch, you could use it like we've said black. Black in our defense means we're going to switch it. So terminology that the other team doesn't know that your team knows would be an advantage. So I would consider that when you're choosing your terminology.
Yeah, that's good. So we talked about communication. So let's double back on one we've touched on a little bit, but let's just go a little bit deeper here and let's go mindset. All right. So let's each share one or two things of if we could crack open the brain of our players, right? And there's two or three things that we want them to be thinking on the regular. Like if we could program their mindset, what things would we program into their mindset, Sam?
So I think I'd start with this is good. Good question. It's kind of hard to even articulate. Number one, we got to care. We got to care about the defensive end. And the only reason that, not the only, one of the reasons our players will care is if coaches care. And in today's basketball world, most players are spending time with the ball in their hands with their trainer outside. Most players, have a trainer. They don't talk about half of the game. Half of the game is played on defense. So, and like our AAU practices, I tell our parents, I tell our players, we're going to spend time becoming better defensive players. That is player development. You may not think of it that way because you think of player development as becoming a better shooter, dribbler, passer, finisher with the ball in your hands. So defense matters because it's where we're going to spend half the game, and you can make an impact on the game. Again, not going to get it on Twitter or Instagram or on social media. You're not going to see the highlight of great, stunt and recovers or great closeouts or helping over from a goal, like you said, a goalie position that, cut off a drive. Like none of that gets celebrated. It's not going to, Stephen A. Smith's not going to talk about that on First Take or after a game. You're not going to hear Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith talking about how great of a defensive player that was oftentimes. So it starts with me is like, let's make defense matter. Mindset. So it's got to matter. You got to care. You got to give like I said before, an effort, a competitive effort that says I do care. Okay, let me stop. What you got?
Lisa, what you got?
That's pretty good. You were getting fired up there, but I would just want, if on defense, I think I want them to be aggressive, and so that mindset of playing offense on defense where you want to get the defense off balance. You're not just being passive. And I coach the
Pack line.
pack line. Thank you. So I coached a version of pack line for years, and I had some players who were frustrated because they wanted to be more aggressive. They just felt like, man, I just have to sit back all the time. And I wouldn't say that it was wrong, like what we did at all. We were very successful, but I also think that there are opportunities if you look at your personnel or you look at who you have and you give them times that they can be aggressive, that you can even, after a timeout, throw the offense off balance. And I would want my players to be having fun on defense, and so whether it's mixing it up in terms of a trap every once in a while, throwing in a 3/4 court, something like that, where your players stay engaged, but also like, to balance out the pack line or to balance out your zone, whatever that is. I want to find ways for them to be aggressive and express themselves. We have one of the best defenders, I think, in the country on our team. And for us to try and get her to back up or to play our principles or for her defense or her body to look very specifically when she's very unorthodox in her movements, I think would take away from her game. And so sometimes we take away, this is what I want to do, and we want to put it in a little box and say it has to look like this. And I think players, that are defensive minded should have opportunities to express themselves and get you a couple extra points. And I know it can be risky at times, like, hey, they might go for a steal and not get it, but then teaching them how to do that. And so whatever it takes to be aggressive and have fun in whatever system you have, I think can be done, and it keeps your players engaged.
Yeah, I think those are all really good. And I do think it's a really important thing. I've made a note for myself as we're in season and starting to practice here a couple hours a week. Like, what is it that I want them to be thinking? What is it I want them to be feeling on the defensive end is actually, I think, a really important thing, because I think that's what moves people to action is when they feel it in their heart and head and they feel like, this is what I need to do. And, a couple of things that I put down very much in line with what you guys said is like, I think it was Brad Stevens a while ago. I remember watching one of the videos and he says, I want omnipresent defenders. And it's a big word, but omnipresent means they're aware, like they're paying attention to everything that's going on. And, a lot of defensive players can just lock into what's my job? What do I need to do? What is the thing that has to happen? But like just being aware is going to allow you to make better decisions. So I always like the idea of they're engaged mentally is really important. I always like the idea of in their mind, like guarding 1.5. It's never just about guarding mine. It's always about having a half support to my teammate, because, the better we are collectively, the better, because especially depending on your team defensively, like we don't have the athletes to be good individually. So we have to be good. And this may be different for another team. They may have a different side, but I always feel like 1.5 is super important for us. And then I really like the idea, both of you alluded to this, is like just the mindset of, Lenny Acuff, who's a friend of ours, coaches at Sanford now, was at Lipscomb. But on offense, they have a great saying, be the hammer, not the nail. And basically, like, people are going to try and take you out of stuff and whatever, but just be aggressive. I actually really like that on defense too, like not having that mindset of I have to, but having the mindset of I get to. When you think about it, like a college game is 40 minutes. And if you're going to spend 20 of it on defense and you don't like defense, you really only get to play about 15 games. If you're playing 30, you only get to play about 15 because half the game you're going to be on defense. And so how do you get players to actually be excited about being on defense, I think is really important.
TJ, sorry, I know you're going to go to another thing. I was thinking about this when Lisa's answer earlier, or when you asked the question, my answer was effort. Lisa's answer was knowing what type of shot, or excuse me, Lisa, you said, hey, we got to know what type of shots we don't want them to take. I think that, or we want them to take, whatever. Either way is fine, right? But this just kind of triggered for me right now. Is like, let's say that both you guys are college coaches. You walked into your practice on the first day and you said, team, I'm not going to teach you anything on defense. The only thing I'm going to tell you is this. I expect you to give max effort. And number two, I don't want to give up any layups and no uncontested threes. Figure it out. Now, that would be interesting to me to see what happens with the players. If you said, I'm going to sub you out if I don't think you're giving effort, or if you do, if you break one of our principles of giving up what we don't want. Like, that would be an interesting case study. I'm not going to do it personally. I'm not going to take that approach. But if another coach took it and did a year-long study with it, I'd be interested to know what comes of it. I think that goes back to your first question, TJ, is like, what's the main thing? And I think that's where we got to always source it from. What are your thoughts on that? Would you do that, TJ, with your team?
I think it's interesting. I actually think it'd be a fun practice to have, like give them that directive and see how they do. Like Lisa was talking about it earlier, is like, this is what I don't want. Let them try and figure it out. I'd love to see what they would do. I mean, my first gut reaction is like they are so almost like polar opposites. Like so many times you give up threes because you get beat off the dribble. And so like players come up and they take away the three, then they're getting beat and you're rotating and you actually give up the best kind of threes. And so that's where it's like, but it would be good to see it play out, see if they would figure that out. Like, well, actually we're giving up the best kind of threes because we're so aggressive on our 3-point closeouts, and how would they adjust and what would they do? And that's where I do think systems, because I think it's one of the biggest system decisions you're going to make. Like, how important is it to keep the ball in front of you? versus how aggressive do I want to be? Like I think ball pressure versus containment is like the hardest defensive decision to make. Like, this goes back to like put coaches in in a decision mode. Like you can only have one of two. You're going to ball pressure the heck out of it, but you're going to get beat off the dribble, right? Or you can contain it, but you're going to give up some threes, doing it. Which one do you choose? Now, almost every coach says, well, I think you can pressure the ball and contain it and do it. It's great. I love that. Congratulations. But in the reality, like it doesn't happen. Like, so you had to pick one. So I really like that idea. And I really do like the idea of putting the problem in front of the players. And, Dave Smart, really successful coach in Canada, he has this defense where, they try and force to the weak hand all of the time. Right. And so you go into practice, there's another one to say, hey, I don't want them to get to their strong hand, and just see how every player responds. See if they can figure it out. You probably learn a lot about your players and what they're thinking in any of those scenarios. So depending on your amount of time, like if you have time to experiment, these would be some great experiments to work with to see how, and you probably read and learn a lot about your players by how they respond in those situations.
Love it. Thanks for entertaining the question.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for asking, Sam. All right. Hey, listen, let's move on to kind of a third and final one here as we're going what about tangible, like actual teachings, so we talked about communication and the mindset and like, you get on defense, like what are some of the best teaching points you give or you've heard given, or things that you really think make a difference on the defensive end, versus just some, I'll give one and then I'll pass it to you, Lisa, and Sam. Let's just kind of popcorn style as we go around, maybe share one, and then everybody will keep going until we run out of time or run out of nuggets here. So one is like the teaching of angles on rebounding. So I think one of the things we always say is like, hey, like go box out, or we touch and go, or everyone has their different defensive philosophy. But one of the things I see cause a lot of rebounds to be had is like, I'm trying to explain this, but let's just say Lisa's at the 3-point line and Sam is on the block. Shot goes up. Lisa's running in and Sam's running out in a straight line. I think the advantages to the offensive rebounder, because one juke, one move or whatever, and they go around, your momentum's going to the ball, their momentum's going away from the ball, and they have to react to that. I think taking good solid angles, like if somebody attacks from the baseline, drive your box out of bounds. If they attack from the top side, just push them higher and farther. Like I think that's one thing that is not taught enough. I think we just always think it's a brute force thing on rebounding, but I actually think teaching how to take good angles to hit your box outs or your touch and goes, whatever you do, I think is an important thing. Lisa, what you got?
Yeah, mine is and this is a good one for when watching film one-on-one with players, but I'm sure it happens anytime, but just knowing where the threat is. I think understanding when we're going through a scout, and obviously, again, it happens a little bit reactively to say, hey, this was their best players on this side of the floor. We know that they're trying to get these shots. You're guarding this person over here on this side of the floor. Are you aware? You're worried too much about this action. Where's the threat? Because I think a lot of times this is where I feel like we hone in on like, they're thinking about principles. Okay, I need to be in my gap now. Okay, now I'm guarding the ball. I need to have one hand. I need to force baseline. Okay, now I'm in help, but I'm really just trying to pinch it because they don't want their guy to score, which is great. We obviously don't want that either. But they're not playing the game. And so when they start to recognize the most important things, it's kind of like what you said about being omnipresent and engaged. The game will slow down from, and they'll realize, okay, this is when I need to be all the way over in my help. And this is when I'm guarding their best player and I need to be ready to come off this certain action or guard this screen or communicate something. And so it's kind of being one step ahead when they start to realize these are actually the threats. And as you go through the game, you start as a player, I think you start to figure those things out. I think that's the best part is they're out there and they're seeing it. They know what that one player's jab back to their favorite shot is, or their shot fake. Okay, they're going to do that every time on this side of the floor. Like they start to figure those things out. And so then you can play smarter. And that's what I want my players to do.
Yeah, similar, Lisa. Like the two things I had written down were basketball IQ. Smarter player is a more athletic player. on defense. The more I know about TJ's strengths, the more athletic I am. And I know that, let me explain. If I know TJ loves driving right and I can anticipate that, I'm actually quicker. I'm quicker. I know it mentally. My feet will move quicker. When I'm guessing, and if I play a really good player where I don't know what they're going to do, like they make me look slower, they make me look stupider because they're a more skilled and advanced player. So I see too many players just play basketball. They just play. They don't think and they don't compete. And there is a huge difference. TJ, I'm going to watch your team practice this Friday, and I'll watch a lot of things, I'm sure, but like to me, one interesting thing will be like who really out here is straining and competing and thinking, and who's just kind of out there because they got the jersey on and they're on a team and I'm here to play. And I think there's a big difference. And the second thing is the fouls and the physicality. I think Dick DiVinzio says like you should foul like 30 times in a game. Like you may only get called for 3 or 4 of them. And so learning how to use your body to play physical, whether guarding the ball or off the ball, is important to like when I guard a player who drives, how to lean my chest or maybe, hide my forearm into their hip. Not in a dirty way, but in a way I'm going to jar them away from their angle. And again, that's something I think that coaches can teach. How to be disciplined, play hard, and be smart, and not play. Sorry, let me get my words out. Play hard defense without fouling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we got a couple more, and then y'all jump in if you got any more. I think one thing I think you need to think about philosophically, but I think it's a really good teaching point is like, does your post defense match your perimeter defense? And, so for example, like the pack line does a really good job in this, like Tony Bennett, their whole philosophy, but, they're forcing the ball back to the middle and they're staying top side of post defense. So almost every post entry had to go against the grain, against the defense. And so it matched really well. And I think oftentimes, like if you are fronting and you have no ball pressure, that's a problem. You know what I mean? Because then, so that you just have to make sure those two things match up. I think another important thing is paying attention to be able to help your team is what are you going to see the most? Like do the 5 best teams in your league spend ball screens 50% of the time? Like that's something you need to spend time on in practice. And like one of the things we can do shell drill for forever and ever and play around the post and how we're going to guard the post. And then every team you play, 80% of teams you play 5 out and nobody post up, right? Like you're working on things that don't matter. So I think putting time into things that really matter. I think another one that is really like important for us is like teaching players how to keep the ball in front of them. And so when we close out, like try and take away a rhythm 3, and then we bounce off the ball, we spend a lot of time bouncing back so that their first dribble has to actually work to get to our body so that we've then guarded the first dribble early without actually having to guard the first dribble. Because there's players that need help, advantages. They need to be able to have, how can I gain a little bit of an advantage? Like I'm not as quick as the guy I'm guarding or the girl that I'm guarding. How do I gain an advantage? So like bouncing back rather than just staying there on a closeout, I think is really important. The one Tony Bennett's teams did so good in the pack line is they had a habit, a lot of times you're playing shell drill, you're working on defense and they're like, I'm in the help. When the ball gets passed, then I jump to my guy. Like I'm going to defend the person that I'm defending. But they used to say when the ball's going from the ground to the gather, get back to your person. And it made you like kind of what Sam was talking about, a second faster. And 1 second faster on defense is a lot of time. So thinking about little things like that in your teachings.
TJ, sorry, one thing on that is like that. Another even a more detail is the second hand to the ball. When that player dribbles and starts to get the second hand, either a shot or a pass is about to happen, which we typically need to get closer to our man or woman, right? So
Yeah.
just adding that.
Yeah. So I think little things, like all the things that we shared. I mean, I've got 1 or 2 more, but let's just keep popcorn at least. So you got another one?
Yeah, mine are actually a little bit of 2 questions. 2 that I've heard that I haven't really coached would be being the second jumper. So like never, if you're on the closing out on the perimeter and you want to contest a shot, you don't jump until the offensive player actually jumps into their shot. So you're reacting to that. Let me know your thoughts there. And then the second one would be ball screen, where if you want to go over the screen, you actually give a gap so that you're hoping that as the screen comes over to you, it's where you are, and then you're going to press up to get over it. And if you want to go under the screen, you press up to get that screen higher, because hopefully you're thinking they're going to come all the way up to where you are, and then you're going to slide under the screen to give yourself the gap underneath. So you're trying to manipulate where the screen is, so that as a defender, you can do then the opposite as when it's time to actually react. I don't necessarily think I agree with that. I feel like I've seen more success on a ball screen defense where you press up onto the ball no matter what, because you can probably make them, especially at different levels, you could probably get them 6 inches to a foot or two off of that screen, and you can just get through it more effectively. And even if you're going under, I do like the idea of getting up closer and then sliding, being able to sprint under it, then gives yourself a little bit more room. But love to hear your thoughts on those two if you've coached them.
Yeah, Lisa, I think the second jumper, I haven't coached a ton of that like terminology, but yes, I agree with the premise. I mean, where we've moved to the last probably 3, 4 years is I don't teach players to jump at all. Like I want them to stay grounded actually. So I'm saying yes, and maybe I'm also disagreeing. I think if you're gonna jump, be the second jumper. Let me say it that way. Also, just stay on the ground. For every shot, every time you jump to block a shot, and let's say for every block you get, here's what's going to happen 5 other times. Uh, Good shot fake, you're going to fly by. That's going to happen a couple. You're going to foul the person, you know. So the success rate of jumping into block shots or contests is just so low to me.
Yeah, but the one thing I think you have to consider is that rule change of verticality. Like, I don't know how much that's playing out at younger ages, but like, it's almost like a freeway to foul some ways. Like, like you get to the habit now, like, they drive, and if you just jump straight up, and there's contact, they're not calling it, you know what I mean? But if you're on the ground and there's contact, they're calling it. And so I think it's actually a change in the last year or two, like of something that we need to work on more as a team is actually jumping every time. Now, I think, you know, on the perimeter, that's a different topic. I think in the post, I think you have to reevaluate it over the last couple of years because of the verticality rule of just being able to go up and down. Like if a player is attacking the rim, I think players are really thrown off by that. And I think referees are lessly likely to call it. Sorry about that. They're a lot less likely to call it because the new rules, like, oh no, that's verticality. It's like a bailout for them. No, that's verticality. And so I think you have to adjust when the rules adjust too. That's one thing to think about.
That's a good point. Yeah, I had this visual of somebody jumping up and down along the perimeter and thinking that'd be horrible defense.
Yeah.
But inside the paint area, I think that'd be a good move.
Yeah. And then the ball screen defense, I think this is a difficult one. Like, I think at each level, how many do you need? So your question is probably like, I think a lot of high schools, depending on if you just got really good at one ball screen defense, like that would probably be enough and like how you dictate it. And I think as long as you're good at it, that trumps how many you have. And then I think when you get to maybe the NBA, when they have all of these different things in different ways, and another thing to account for is the best offenses manipulate where they set the screen. The defense doesn't always have the choice to choose. So like, a lot of people will set a back screen into a ball screen. Doesn't give the defense time to get them off their spot. I think there's a lot that goes into ball screens. I know we had a guest on at University of Michigan, a friend of yours, did a great job talking about ball screen defense. But yeah, I think that's a deep one. So, hey, coaches, we covered a lot of ground here, and we could probably go for a lot longer. But in one, it's a kind of a tricky one. Like you can't get so bogged down in the weeds of everything that you're not keeping the main thing. But at the same time, taking the little one percenters and applying them so your team is getting better. Now, when the one percenters become the loudest thing, that's probably a problem. But when they know and understand the main thing, and you can supplement that with 1%ers like we talked about here, then your team's going to be better defensively. So yeah, anyway, that was fun. Master teaching defense. How can you go in and help your team defensively? We'd love to hear your thoughts. What are some things that you're doing, that you're teaching and with your team that you feel like really helps? You can hit us up at hardwood_hustle, and at pgchustle.com. We have some free resources for you, and we'd love to have you go deeper with us. If not, just grab those free resources. But as always, we appreciate you. She is Lisa, and he is Sam. I am TJ, and we are the Hardwood Hustle.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Hardwood Hustle, where we believe in the value of a coach. Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at hardwood_hustle to stay up to date on the latest episodes and share your thoughts with our coaching community. From the Hardwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.